I stood in my parents' doorway holding a plate of cookies and a bag of gifts, only to hear children laughing inside the adults-only Christmas party I was told not to bring my son to. I'm Callie, a widow, a mother. And that night, I realized my son wasn't excluded because he was noisy. He was excluded because he was mine. What would you do if your own family treated your child like he didn't belong, while making room for everyone else's? This is the story of the moment I stopped chasing approval and started building a new kind of family. Tell me, have you ever felt like the outsider in your own family? I was slicing apples for Noah's lunch when I realized I was crying, and not just from the onions. The scent of cinnamon from the toast I'd just pulled from the toaster mingled with the faint smell of rain slipping through the window crack. Noah was humming something off-key, swinging his little feet under the table as he scribbled on his spelling worksheet. It had been almost 6 months since Mark's accident. 6 months of paperwork, muted condolences, and learning how to fold laundry for one instead of two. Yet every morning still began with autopilot steps. Eggs, toast, lunchbox packed with a note. Just like before, only now I always packed it alone. If someone had told me a year ago that my biggest comfort would come from my in-laws, I'd have laughed, I muttered under my breath. Then again, a year ago, I had a husband. Mark's old Penn State mug sat on the dish rack. I'd left it there after washing it the first time and couldn't bring myself to move it. Next to the door, his jacket still hung like it might be worn again any second. Sometimes I'd catch myself glancing toward it as I passed by, half expecting his voice calling from the porch, asking where he left his keys. "Mom, is a triceratops a carnivore?" Noah asked suddenly, holding up a crayon drawing with 3 oddly shaped horns and what looked like lightning bolts. I blinked. "No, honey, herbivore. It eats plants." He nodded seriously, turning back to his artwork like he was preparing a scientific presentation. There was something about the way he absorbed everything, even the silence, that reminded me so much of Mark it hurt. We finished breakfast with the quiet rhythm we'd built together. He tied his shoes himself, mostly right, and gave me a sticky kiss on the cheek before heading out the door. I watched him climb into the school bus, backpack bobbing. I waved longer than necessary, then stood in the drizzle a moment longer, letting the cold nudge me back to motion. I hadn't planned to stop by Linda and Robert's that morning, but I found myself pulling into their driveway anyway. Their porch light was still on, a warm circle of amber against the gray sky. Linda opened the door before I knocked. "Coffee's on," she said, already stepping aside. I stepped into the familiar kitchen, steam rising from 2 mugs waiting on the counter. Robert was reading the newspaper, glasses low on his nose. He nodded, folding the page silently before rising to hug me, a firm, no-words kind of hug that spoke volumes. "Toast?" Linda asked. I shook my head. "You could still be hungry," she interrupted gently, not looking at me as she pulled down a plate. We sat at the table talking about Noah's school, his upcoming class trip to the planetarium, and how Robert had started planting early this year. I sipped the coffee, letting the warmth chase off the morning chill from my sleeves. "I brought you a few things from the store," Linda said casually, reaching into a paper bag. Bananas, eggs, a box of cereal Noah liked, and then, subtly, an envelope slid onto the chair next to my purse. I noticed, of course. She probably hoped I wouldn't, but I did. "Linda," I said softly, placing my hand on the envelope before she could move it further. "You don't have to do this." Her eyes met mine, calm and kind. "Sweetheart, I know you're managing, but just because you can do it alone doesn't mean you should have to." "It's not about the money," I whispered. "I know," she said. "That's why we want to help." I stared down at the envelope a moment longer before sliding it back into her hands. "I can't take it, but thank you. Really." Robert reached across the table and gently patted my wrist. "We're not trying to fix anything. We're just trying to hold the pieces with you." Something about that sentence almost made me cry again, but I swallowed it back. After a while, I stood, thanking them both again. As I left, Linda pressed a wrapped muffin into my hand. "For Noah," she said, then added, "and maybe a bite for you too." The rain had slowed by the time I pulled into our driveway. I climbed the steps slowly, pausing at the porch swing Mark built the summer after we got married. Noah used to sit there with him, counting the fireflies. I hung up my coat, then sat at the kitchen table again, staring at the grocery bag. My parents had never brought over groceries, never called just to ask how Noah was adjusting, never stopped by without a reason, especially not one that didn't benefit them in some way. The phone buzzed. I flinched slightly before reaching for it. Mom. "Hey, sweetie. We're having Sunday dinner this week. Vanessa and the kids will be there. You should come. Bring Noah." There was no, "How are you?" No, "We've been thinking about you." Just a directive, neatly typed like a calendar reminder. Still, something tugged inside me. Maybe it was loneliness, or just the childish hope that maybe this time would be different. I replied, "We'll come." Later that night, after the dishes were stacked and Noah was fast asleep, I folded his tiny jeans and shirts fresh from the dryer. The scent of detergent and little boy energy clung to the fabric. I brushed my fingers over one of his t-shirts, the one with the little rocket ship on it, and placed it gently in his drawer. Then I sat on the edge of my bed, stared at the message from Mom one more time, and whispered to no one, "Maybe this time, it'll be different." The lasagna was still bubbling when I stepped into my parents' house. Always a warning sign. Mom only made her signature lasagna when she had an ask tucked behind the garlic bread. The scent wafted through the pristine hallways like a practiced performance. Everything in the house gleamed, the polished banister, the spotless tile floors, even the folded napkins on the table shaped like little swans. But it all felt like a stage. No warmth, just lighting. Noah clung to my hand, his eyes wide with curiosity. "Grandma's clock is still ticking weird," he whispered, pointing toward the massive grandfather clock in the corner of the living room. "Don't touch it, please," Mom said without looking up, her voice like someone managing an exhibit. I smiled softly, kneeling next to Noah. "Why don't we just look at it from here? Maybe we can figure out why it ticks so loudly." He nodded and crouched beside me, watching the brass pendulum swing. Meanwhile, Vanessa's twins were already buried in their tablets, motionless except for their fingers flicking across the screen. Not a single adult seemed to notice. "You see?" Mom murmured as she walked past, carrying a tray of perfectly aligned dinner rolls. "Vanessa's children always know how to behave." I didn't answer. I just stood up, brushing invisible dust from my jeans, and followed Noah to the table. The dining room hadn't changed since I was a teenager. Same velvet chairs, same 2 white tablecloth, same framed photos on the sideboard. Only now, all of them featured Vanessa's family. There was one from her wedding, one with her kids at Disney World, even one of her dog dressed as Santa. No photos of Mark, no pictures of Noah. Dad greeted us with a nod, already seated and scrolling on his phone. Kyle sat beside him, absorbed in a basketball game playing silently on the wall-mounted TV. Vanessa was radiant as always, wearing a muted beige sweater that perfectly matched her lipstick. Dinner began in stilted conversation. Weather, gas prices, how early spring had come this year. Noah, undeterred, turned to Mom. "Grandma, how does the clock know what time it is?" Mom sighed, setting her fork down with a delicate clink. "It's just a clock, Noah." "But what's inside? Like, does it have gears or—" "Callie," she interrupted, her eyes flicking toward me. "Maybe try to help him focus. He's very inquisitive." It wasn't meant as a compliment. I nodded and gently touched Noah's arm. "Why don't we talk more about clocks at home, buddy?" He frowned but nodded, scooting his chair closer to mine. The table quieted just long enough for Mom to clear her throat. "So, how are things financially, dear?" I froze, fork halfway to my mouth. "What do you mean?" I asked, keeping my tone even. "Well," she said, arranging her napkin carefully on her lap, I imagine the insurance company was generous. I mean, it's not something anyone wants, of course, but these things can at least offer some stability. Dad nodded. We just want to make sure you're thinking long term. Investing wisely. I swallowed a mouthful of lasagna that suddenly felt like glue. It's for Noah. For college. Maybe an apartment one day. Vanessa dabbed at the corner of her mouth, the picture of elegance. That's so smart, Callie. I've been thinking a lot about the future, too. That's why Kyle and I decided to help Mom and Dad monthly. Just $500 for now. We wish we could do more. Kyle's head snapped up. We what? Vanessa gave him a look that could freeze boiling water. We discussed this. Right, he muttered, reaching for his wine glass. Of course. All eyes turned to me. I felt the weight before anyone said a word. Well, Mom offered lightly, Vanessa does have 2 kids, and with Kyle's job being so demanding. I only have Noah, I said, voice quieter than I intended. Exactly, Dad said, as if that proved a point. I wanted to scream. I wanted to stand and say, do you know how many nights I go without sleep? How often I lie to Noah and say I'm fine when my heart still shatters every time he asks about his dad? But I didn't. Instead, I nodded. I can do $1,000 a month, I said, barely hearing my own voice. There was a pause, a collective exhale from the table. Mom beamed. Vanessa offered a soft, almost reverent, thank you. We finished dinner with awkward small talk and tepid coffee. Noah yawned 3 times before I gathered our things to leave. As we drove home, the streetlights blurred through the windshield, and Noah hummed softly in the back seat. When we got inside, I tucked him into bed and lingered at the doorway, watching him fall asleep. Then I sat at the kitchen table, opened my laptop, and logged into my bank account. I set up a recurring monthly transfer, $1,000 to Mom and Dad. Then I opened the spreadsheet where I tracked every penny since Mark died. Savings, insurance, bills, dreams. I hovered over the row labeled Vacation Fund, Summer 2023, a beach trip for just me and Noah. He'd been so excited about seeing the ocean. I deleted the row. Just like that, the dream was gone, replaced by a recurring expense that felt more like a subscription to validation than generosity. I'm so sorry, honey. I've got the worst migraine today, Mom said, again. Her voice had that same feathery tone she always used when excusing herself from something. Sweet, but just detached enough to make you feel guilty for asking. I was standing in the hallway at work, phone pressed to my ear, coat still half on, heart sinking despite knowing better. Oh, I understand, I said, even though I didn't. It's okay. It wasn't, but I said it anyway. I really would have loved to help with Noah, she added vaguely, but I've had this pounding behind my eyes all morning. You know how those migraines get. I did. Or at least, I knew how they became her favorite alibi. Okay, feel better, I murmured, trying not to let the disappointment color my voice. She didn't ask about Noah's school project, or how my presentation went this morning, or anything at all that made the conversation feel mutual, just the excuse, and then silence. After I hung up, I stood for a long moment staring out the front office window. The sky was heavy and gray, and the wind shook a few early amber leaves loose from the trees lining the parking lot. Autumn had begun, painting everything in quiet golds and rust. But inside me, everything felt steel gray. Noah's school day ended in less than an hour. Sarah, bless her heart, had a last-minute checkup for her back, and I didn't want to drag Noah into the hospital waiting room after school again. My mom was supposed to be the backup plan, but plans never really stuck with her. I texted Robert, "Any chance you're free for pickup today? I know it's last minute." His reply came less than 2 minutes later. On it. Wouldn't miss a chance to hear about Noah's volcano again. I smiled, my shoulders dropping a little. Sometimes help didn't need to be complicated. It just needed to be sincere. I returned to my desk and tried to focus on client revisions, but my brain kept skipping tracks. I'd been sending my parents $1,000 a month for 3 months now, without so much as a thank you. Not a card, not a call, not even acknowledgement. But here I was, still doing it, while also juggling childcare, late-night reports, and a house that never stayed clean long enough to matter. At 4:15, another text lit up my screen. Robert. Got him. Hot chocolate in hand. He's telling me why baking soda is superior to vinegar. That made me laugh, for real this time. When I pulled into the Hayes driveway later that evening, the porch light was already glowing, a signal I'd come to associate with safety. The front door opened before I even knocked, and there was Noah, grinning like he'd just won a prize. "Mom, guess what? Grandpa Robert says if I add just the right amount of dish soap, the volcano will foam for real." I tousled his hair. "That sounds exciting." Robert stepped out behind him, coffee in one hand, hoodie sleeves rolled to his elbows. "He's got plans," he said with a smile. "Big ones. You might want to invest in more paper towels." "I think I can budget that," I said lightly, though my stomach turned at the word budget. Everything felt like a number lately. Robert bent down and handed Noah a brown paper bag for the scientist. Inside was a bag of marshmallows and a fresh bottle of vinegar. "Don't let him explode the kitchen," Robert joked to me as I led Noah toward the car. I paused before getting in. "Thank you, really. I know I ask a lot." "You don't ask enough," he said gently. "And besides, we like seeing him. He's family." That word, it caught in my throat. I nodded, unable to say much more without unraveling right there on the driveway. Later that night, after Noah was asleep, I sat in the kitchen staring at the glow of my laptop screen. The digital clock on the stove blinked 9:37 p.m. I hadn't eaten dinner. I wasn't really hungry anyway. I opened my banking app. There it was, as always. Transfer completed. $1,000 to C. Monroe. No message from my mother, no voicemail, no thank you note. I switched over to my text thread with her. The last message was mine, sent 3 days ago. Noah's school has a fall art night on Friday. He made a painting of the solar system. He wants you to come, read. No response. I scrolled further. Messages about Sunday dinners, check-ins about her health, little updates about Noah. All read, most unanswered. And yet, month after month, I'd sent money. It had started with guilt. Guilt over being the daughter who survived, the one with an extra income, the one who didn't need as much. Then it turned into obligation. And now it just felt like rent. Rent for a title I didn't even want anymore. I closed the app, opened my calendar, and stared at the recurring event. Sunday dinner, 6 p.m. every week. It had started after Mark died, a way to keep family intact, they said. But it wasn't family. It was a script I kept performing, hoping one day someone might notice I was acting the whole time. I hovered over the event. Delete just this one? Or all future events? I tapped all future events. The calendar blinked. Then it was gone. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the ceiling. The silence in the house was thick, but not unfamiliar. "This isn't family," I whispered aloud, the words startling me with their sharpness. "This is debt." And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel sad when I said it, just certain. Mom called me a week before Christmas with that syrupy voice she only used when she was about to disappoint me. "Sweetheart," she'd said, stretching the word like a ribbon across a gift. "This year, we're doing something a little different for Christmas Eve." I'd held my phone tighter, already bracing. "Different how?" "Well," she continued, breezy as ever, "we thought it might be nice to keep things elegant. Just the adults. You know, wine, soft music, real conversation. No children this time, just a grown-up evening for once." I didn't answer right away. I stared at the calendar above my kitchen sink where Noah had drawn stars and candy canes all over December 24th, counting down the days. "So, Noah's not invited?" "Oh, honey," she said gently. "Linda and Robert adore him. He'll have a blast with them, won't he?" And like that, it was decided. On Christmas Eve, the snow began falling just before sunset, thin and feathery. Noah stood at the window with his nose pressed against the glass. "Why can't I go too, Mommy?" he asked for the third time, his voice small. I knelt beside him and zipped up his coat. "Grandma wanted it to be a quiet evening," I said carefully. "Just adults." He looked at me, his eyes so much like Mark's it made my heart twist. "But I can be quiet." "I know, baby, I know." I dropped him off at Linda and Robert's with his little overnight bag and an apology I couldn't fully articulate. Robert gave me a long, knowing hug. Linda handed me a plate of cookies to take, just in case. Then I drove through the lit-up streets of Lancaster, each house glowing with Christmas cheer. Mine didn't glow. It dimmed with every mile. My parents' driveway was full, more cars than usual for our family. I climbed the steps, balancing a bag of carefully wrapped gifts and the plate of cookies, the cold biting my fingers through my gloves. Laughter spilled from the house. I could hear music, clinking glasses, the unmistakable squeals of children. My stomach turned. I opened the door. The warmth hit me first, then the sound. The house was filled with people, relatives, friends, all the familiar faces, and children. Vanessa's twins raced through the living room in paper crowns, tossing candy at each other. My cousin Cheryl's youngest sat cross-legged near the tree, inspecting presents. My uncle's teenagers were by the fireplace, arguing over the playlist. I stood there, frozen. "Callie," Aunt Cheryl appeared, cheeks flushed. "Where's Noah? Don't tell me he's sick on Christmas Eve." Before I could respond, more voices joined in. "Where's the little scientist?" asked Cousin Mike. "Did he finish that volcano?" someone else added. "Is he coming later?" came another question. I opened my mouth, but no words came out. The door clicked shut behind me. I stood in the entryway holding the gifts like a shield, heart hammering. I scanned the room. No one else looked confused. No one else had left their child behind. Just me. I walked into the kitchen, the gifts still in hand, and found Mom arranging cookies on a holiday platter. She turned with a smile. "You made it. We were just about to—" "You told me no kids were allowed," I said, voice steady. Her smile faltered. "Well, that was before Vanessa said, 'You told me not to bring Noah,'" I repeated. "Specifically, you said it was going to be adults only." Mom straightened her sweater, avoiding my eyes. "Those children know how to behave in gatherings. They don't interrupt or ask questions." I blinked. "You think Noah doesn't know how to behave?" "I didn't say that." "But you meant it." Her lips pursed. "Callie, don't make this a scene." I set the bag of gifts down on the counter. "I'm not the one who made this a scene." Then I turned, walked into the living room, and raised my voice. Not loud, but firm. "Everyone," I said. "Sorry to interrupt, but some of you have been asking where Noah is." The room quieted. A dozen faces turned toward me. I didn't bring him because I was told this was an adults-only party. No children allowed. Aunt Cheryl's brow furrowed. "What? That's ridiculous." "I thought so too," I said, "but that's what I was told. And yet here we are, surrounded by children, just not mine." Whispers rippled through the room. Vanessa shifted uncomfortably on the couch. "And while we're clarifying things," I continued, "some of you may have heard that Vanessa and I both contribute financially to help our parents." Vanessa's smile wavered. "Callie, Vanessa says she sends $500 a month," I went on, "but she doesn't. That story was just to convince me to send more." Jack, Vanessa's husband, looked up from his plate. "Wait, what money?" She turned pale. "Jack, I was going to tell you. You told me you canceled the gym because we couldn't afford it," he said sharply. The tension cracked like thin ice. Conversation stopped. My parents stood by the tree, visibly stiff. "They asked her to say it," I added. "They thought if I believed she was helping too, I wouldn't hesitate." Aunt Cheryl gasped. "You guilt-tripped your daughter into paying you every month while excluding her son from Christmas?" "Callie's exaggerating," Mom stammered. But no one was listening anymore. You always said family came first, I said, looking directly at my mother. Turns out you just meant Vanessa. No one stopped me as I picked up my coat and stepped toward the door. I left the gift bag on the entryway table. Outside, the snow was falling harder. It settled on my shoulders as I stepped into the night, but I didn't brush it off. For the first time in a long time, I felt light. When I walked into Linda and Robert's home that night, I didn't have to explain why I was crying. Robert just handed me a mug of cocoa and said, "You're home." It was all he needed to say. The scent of cinnamon and vanilla drifted through the living room, where twinkle lights framed every window and a modest Christmas tree stood glowing in the corner. Noah was kneeling beside it with Linda, carefully placing a final gingerbread cookie on a plate for Santa. "This one's for you, Mommy," he said, holding out a lumpy, over-frosted treat, with a crooked smile drawn in red icing. I took it like it was gold. "It's perfect," I whispered. He turned back to the table, humming some unrecognizable carol as he picked up another cookie, this time adding far too many gumdrops. Linda and Robert had given him space to just be a child, curious, joyful, messy, and for the first time all day, I let my shoulders drop. "Stocking time," Noah called out, already sprinting toward the stairs. I followed him, his stocking in one hand, the cocoa in the other. He climbed onto the small stepladder by the fireplace and hung the stocking with all the pride in the world. "There," he said. "Now Santa knows I'm here." I kissed the top of his head. Santa never forgets. When I returned to the kitchen, Linda was finishing a batch of hot chocolate. She slid a fresh mug toward me. "You did the right thing," she said gently, not asking for details, just knowing. "You protected your son and yourself." Her words hit harder than any shouting match ever could. "Why wasn't that ever enough for my own parents?" I asked, the words slipping out before I could stop them. "Because they were measuring with the wrong scale," she replied. "You've always measured with love. That's the only ruler that matters." We sat in silence for a few minutes, sipping cocoa and watching the snow fall through the window. It wasn't until much later, after Noah had gone to bed, after the cookies had been wrapped and the dishes cleared, that I found myself breathing easier. Somewhere in the stillness, I realized it wasn't blood that defined a family. It was the people who showed up without being asked. Christmas morning came quietly. Noah burst into the guest room holding a stuffed reindeer and yelling about footprints near the fireplace. Linda made pancakes shaped like stars. Robert read aloud the note Santa left beside the plate of cookies. It wasn't loud, it wasn't extravagant, but it was safe. Around 10 a.m., my phone buzzed on the countertop. The screen lit up with Aunt Cheryl's name. I hesitated, then answered. "Callie, sweetheart," she said, voice warm and a little breathless. "I just needed to call you. You caused quite the ripple last night." I let out a short breath. "I didn't mean to. Well, maybe I did." "No," she cut in. "You needed to, and I'm proud of you." I leaned against the counter. "What happened after I left?" There was a pause. Then, "Well, it didn't stay quiet." People started asking questions. "Your mother tried to brush it all off, but too many ears had heard too much." "And Vanessa?" Cheryl sighed. "Kyle packed up the kids and left. Said he's taking them to his parents for the rest of the holidays. He didn't even take the pie." I blinked. "He left? That night?" "Right after you did," Cheryl confirmed. "And one by one, others followed. I don't think your parents expected so many to take your side." I didn't either. "You don't have to go back there," she said softly. "But you and Noah? You're not alone in this." A tightness in my chest began to loosen. "We're having a second dinner tomorrow," she added. "Just a few of us. Real food. Real people. We'd love to have you." I didn't hesitate. "We'll be there." When I hung up, Linda was already holding out a piece of paper, a handwritten recipe for her gingerbread cookies, labeled in big looping cursive, Noah's favorite. Later that evening at Cheryl's home, I sat around a table with people who didn't just tolerate my presence, they welcomed it. There was laughter, a pie crust that cracked down the middle, an overcooked ham someone joked about for 10 minutes straight. Noah built a Lego castle with Cheryl's grandson while I poured cider for everyone. When Cheryl raised her glass for a toast, I surprised myself by speaking up first. To chosen family, I said, my voice clear, and to finally feeling safe. The clinking of glasses was soft but full. Linda gave my hand a quick squeeze. Snow was melting on the porch when we left that night, just enough to see the cracks in the pavement again, just enough to remind me that seasons change. The next morning, I was folding a blanket in the living room when I noticed a shadow outside the front window. 2 figures stood on the porch, my parents. Cynthia clutched a giant wrapped box, its bow askew. Roger hovered just behind her, eyes unreadable. I stood there, frozen, the warmth of the room suddenly replaced by a slow, quiet tension. They hadn't knocked yet. They just waited. And I wasn't sure if I'd open the door. They stood outside like actors rehearsing an apology, eyes wide, hands shaking, clutching a gift no one asked for. I spotted them through the front window, just past the curtains Noah and I had drawn snowflakes on weeks earlier. Cynthia and Roger standing stiffly on my porch in their Sunday coats, the kind they wore to weddings or funerals. The oversized gift box between them was wrapped in shiny gold paper, a red bow sagging on top, the kind of package that screamed effort but not understanding. Inside, Noah sat cross-legged on the living room floor, coloring diligently. His family tree project for school was nearly done. Crayons were scattered across the table, little paper cutouts taped together in a web of names and titles. I'd offered to help, but he'd insisted on doing it himself. "Mom, is it okay if I draw flowers by Grandma Linda's name?" he asked without looking up, "because she always smells like cinnamon." "Of course," I said, my voice soft. I stepped back from the window. My heart wasn't racing. My palms weren't sweaty. I was calm, clearer than I'd felt in months. I walked slowly to the door and opened it. They didn't speak at first. Cynthia blinked as though surprised I answered. Roger gave a small nod, his hands still deep in his coat pockets. "Callie," Mom said, her voice trembling. We wanted to talk. We've been thinking about everything, about Noah, about you." I said nothing. "We're sorry," she continued. "We didn't mean to exclude him. That wasn't our intention." There it was, the opening line. I remembered how, growing up, every apology came with a "but." "We were just trying to help." "You took it the wrong way. You're being sensitive, like grief could be negotiated." I leaned my shoulder against the doorframe. "Are you sorry because you hurt me, or because everyone saw it?" She hesitated. Roger shifted beside her. "We didn't realize how it looked," she offered, not quite meeting my eyes. "That's not the same as being sorry." "I miss you," she whispered. I nodded. "I believe that. We brought something. For Noah. He loves building things, right? It's a model rocket, the nice kind." She held the box forward a little, hands shaking. I looked down at the gift. "You don't need to buy his place in your life?" "He's our grandson. He's the boy you told not to come on Christmas." Roger finally spoke, his voice quiet. "We thought we were doing what was best. But we were wrong." I believed that too. But that wasn't the point anymore. "I'm not angry," I said. "I just don't want to reopen a door that leads to the same place." A long silence hung between us, the kind that used to frighten me. This time it felt like breathing space. "I'm not trying to punish you," I added, "but I need peace, and Noah needs consistency. That doesn't come from last-minute apologies." Mom's eyes filled with tears. "You won't even let us explain? You just did." She looked down. After a moment, she placed the box gently on the porch. Roger touched her elbow and they turned together, walking slowly back to their car. No harsh words, no yelling, no drama, just an ending. I closed the door. The light inside was warmer than it had been just moments ago. I walked back to the living room where Noah was humming quietly and gluing a star onto his project. "Want to see?" he asked, holding up the poster board proudly. I took it in. His name sat at the top, decorated in silver. Below him was mine, drawn in bold purple letters, and under grandparents, 2 names, Linda and Robert. No mention of Cynthia, no mention of Roger. I didn't say a word. "Do you think Grandma Linda will like it?" he asked. "She's going to love it," I said, running a hand through his hair. "You did great, bud." Later that day, we headed to Cheryl's house for dinner. Sunday evenings there had become tradition, a patchwork family of cousins, friends, neighbors, and love without conditions. Linda brought her famous peach cobbler. Robert helped Noah fix the axle on a toy truck. There was laughter, real laughter, the kind that doesn't trail guilt behind it. After dinner, I washed dishes with Cheryl while Noah built a paper robot with her grandson. Cheryl bumped my elbow gently. "You okay?" I nodded. Better than okay. We stepped out onto the porch for air. The snow was starting to recede, puddles forming in the corners of the steps. "It's melting," I said. She looked out toward the street. Always does. Never seems like it will, but it always does. Back home, I passed by the box still sitting on the porch. I didn't touch it, didn't move it, didn't even glance at the label. Letting go wasn't always dramatic. Sometimes it just meant choosing not to engage. That night, I tucked Noah into bed and kissed his forehead. "Are we going to Sunday dinner again next week?" he mumbled sleepily. "Of course," I whispered. "It's what we do now." I stayed a while, watching his chest rise and fall. The soft hum of our home filled the silence. Radiator hissing, wind brushing the windows, distant laughter from a neighbor's house. This was the life we rebuilt, brick by brick. Quiet, steady, honest. I didn't burn any bridges. I just stopped crossing them. Linda and Robert's on the family tree. I don't feel sad anymore. Is not where we are born, but where one chooses to when you are weak in life, if we still will not let go. Make if you can or not. And if soul ways open the door, always remember, your child's, always listen, without demanding family. This reminds you of held your hand, the let's share your thoughts below, because sometimes just one word is enough. As I watched Noah paste Linda and Robert's names into the family tree, I no longer felt sadness, just clarity. Family is not where you're born, it's where you choose to stay when you're at your weakest. In life, if you love someone, they won't leave you wondering if you're loved. And if someone always opens the door, always remembers your child's birthday, always listens without making demands, that's family. If this story reminds you of someone who held your hand through the storm, share your thoughts below. Because sometimes, just one word is enough to warm the winter.